Ladies and gentlemen, people of all ages, welcome to my comprehensive guide to being an Arbiter here in Neverwinter in module number 33, Jotun Scar. So, happy to get this video out. I have recently made a guide to what it means to be an Arbiter, right? Now, you can see this guide is over 57 pages. Don't ask me how long it took me to create the guide. I'm not going to tell you. It took longer than I thought it would, or longer than I hoped it would. So, for this video, we're going to go over the entire guide, okay? We're not going to do any cuts. This is going to be a raw take, all right? So if I make mistakes, I make mistakes. Hopefully they're not too egregious. So, let's get started here. Who is this guide for? Well, I'm hoping this guide is for about 3 or 4 types of people. First person is a new person to the game here who has never played Neverwinter before, and they are creating their very first character. Second type of person is maybe a person who's played the game before, but has never played an Arbiter. And then the third type of person would be a person who has played the game before, who already has an Arbiter, but maybe they don't play the class as effectively as they could, and they're looking to perfect it. You know, wild card here, maybe you are a seasoned Arbiter, maybe you're an endgame Arbiter, and you think you have perfected the class. Well, hopefully you might take a thing or two from this guide and apply it to your gameplay. Or maybe you can tell me where I went wrong. Either way is great. So let's go ahead and jump in here. Like I said, we're going to start at the very beginning. And the very beginning, one of the first things you're going to do is you're going to create your character, and it's going to ask you which race you want to pick. So each race here, as you can see, they each have their own unique bonuses or unique resistances, that kind of stuff, right? So, grand scheme of things, big picture, whichever race you choose is not going to be a make or break situation for playing the game as a damaging character or a DPS character, damage per second character. So I would just recommend pick whichever bonus you like the most, whichever one looks the best. You know, you want to go role play in Neverwinter, great. Just go ahead and pick a race, whichever one makes you happiest, okay? But if you were to pick a race that would be what I consider the best in slot for end game damage dealers, I would recommend one of the 2 drow races. So the regular drow or the Menzo Baranzan Renegade drow. Now, the reason why I say this is for the Darkfire and the Fairy Fire debuffs. So the Darkfire, when you're attacking a foe, you get a 10% chance to apply it for 5 seconds. And the application is it reduces the target's defense by 5%. Okay, so that's for the Drow. For the Menzo, Baranzan, Renegade, similar thing, similar proc here when attacking a foe, 10% chance for 5 seconds. It's going to reduce the target's defense by 3% and also the damage of their attacks by 3%. Now, these two, they don't stack, so, you know, having 5 Drows in a group is not going to increase or decrease the target's defense by 25%. They don't stack, right? So it's going to be a max of 5% from the Drow, max of 3% defense from the Menzo, Baranzan, Renegade, right? So perfect world, your 5-man dungeon group would have 2 Drow and 2 Menzo, Baranzan, Renegade Drow. Just so you can try to keep those debuffs up 100% of the time for the max potential damage. Now, you see my character. I am decidedly not a Drow, right? So why am I not a Drow if I recommend those 2? Well, it's because I'm a selfish DPS, and I like to see my damage numbers be maxed out and all green when everything is proc. So that's why I'm a Wood Elf for the extra 5% crit streak. And here's a little handy dandy table for you in case you're thinking about making a new character, what I recommend each race for each role. So DPS, a lot of people swear by the Dragonborn, the Metallic Ancestry Dragonborn, all that good stuff, Half-Orc, Gith, Wood Elf. You know, pick whichever one you think looks best or whichever one you want to use. Again, tanks have the recommended races for tanks and also for healers here. All right, moving right along. Next thing after you create your race, you're going to select your ability scores. Now there's 6 ability scores to choose from. You can read here what each ability score does. In terms of the Arbiter, we are most interested in dexterity with the critical severity and movement speed, and also intelligence for the control bonus, and most importantly, the magical damage boost. Now, almost all of our damage is going to be magical. Our mount power, as you'll see towards the end here, is going to be physical, but everything else is magical. So we really want to boost that as high as we can. So in terms of our character, as we get up to level 20, we are going to go ahead and select for our ability scores all dexterity, all intelligence. And if you find yourself towards the end of the game here with all your upgraded gear, everything best in slot, that you're overcapping critical severity by a couple percent, I would just go ahead and move maybe these last 2 dexterity up into strength to further enhance the physical damage of the mount that you're going to be using. Okay, because again, strength is going to increase your physical damage by a certain percent. I think 2 points in the strength is going to increase it by like 0.5%. It's not much, but it's still something. So again, you can see my ability scores there. So this is the character on live. So I was overcapping my crit severity by just over 1%. So I did switch out the last 2 dexterity for 2 strength there. All right, so next thing we go to is the character sheet, right? So for DPS players, we are going to mostly focus on the 5 offensive stat categories. And they are power, accuracy, combat advantage, critical strike, and critical severity. And you can read which each stat does. I'm not going to go over all that. But the main thing I want to go over here is that each stat has its own hard cap. Okay, you can see here the hard cap for the max percent rating. So power, combat advantage, and critical severity all hard cap out at 120%. Accuracy and crit strike are at 90%, right? And then so there's also a max raw rating for these stats, okay? So if you look at the character sheet, you have the rating here on the left side, then you have the total percent on the right side. So the max raw rating that you can get for these 5 offensive stats is correlated to what the total max percent is. So anything with a total max percent of 120%, the total raw rating you can have here on the left side is going to be your item level plus 10,000. Okay, so my max power rating can get up to 154,637. If I go over that hard cap, it's not going to do anything for me. It's not going to increase. If I have 1,000,000 rating in power, it's not going to matter. It's going to take it as if I have just the max 154,637 power. Okay, so as you get to end game, as you're balancing your stats here around the hard caps, try not to over cap too much. So you see here my critical severity is a bolded green. So that means that it is over the max hard cap, and thankfully it's only over by 4 points, so I'm not missing out on much of anything in terms of critical severity. But yeah, this is having its max effect if it's a bold green here, okay? Similar thing for defensive stats. Defense and deflex severity go up to 120 for total max percent, which means that their max raw rating is their item level plus 10,000. And then the rest of the 3, awareness, crit avoid, and deflect, only go up to 90% total max rating, total percent max rating, which means that the total max raw rating is going to be just your item level. Okay, so try not to go too far over that. Otherwise, you'll be wasting stats. And again, you can read what each of these defensive stats do. All right, so now we'll get to the gear enhancements portion of the guide here. So this is the gear I'm currently running. I am currently in preview server. You can see by the number 5 next to my name. I'm in the preview server, so I can just kind of screw around while I'm doing the video for this guide. and you'll see why later. So in terms of gear, what I'm running, the helmet is going to be the Combat Advantage Stacker from Advanced Jotun Scar. An alternative to this is going to be either the MSOD helm for the, again, it's the exact same bonus to 7%, but just not a stacker, for Combat Advantage. If you don't have that, I would recommend doing the helm from Master Soul Harvest or MSH, which is a stacker for accuracy. And in this case, you'll just have to fiddle around with some of your stats at the back end here to make it all fit. And by the way, if you don't have this gear, in my guide here, I show you, if you scroll down a bit, the gear I'm currently using, what the bonuses are, where you can get it from, and also a few alternatives. Okay, so I won't go through all of it, but you can see here in the tables what I recommend for alternatives. I do want to point out for the alternatives for the weapons here for the main hand and the offhand, if you don't have the Master Soul Harvest weapons at least up to Mythic, then this is what I would recommend. But if you have the Mythic MSH weapons, go ahead and use those, okay? So we'll just kind of go through the rest of the gear here for my main build. So for the chest, using, again, Advanced Jotun Scar, the 6% accuracy, 6% Combat Advantage chest on 10 when I do 10% or more of my max HP on an enemy for damage. And again, the alternative would be an almost identical chest piece from Master Lair of the Mad Dragon or Emlomd. It's actually a bit better in terms of stats, but the item level is a bit lower, so it just makes it overall worse. And plus, I don't need the extra 3% from the stats to cap my stats. Okay, the big thing here, the gloves. So Arbiters, unlike every other DPS class in the game, we are beholden to one piece of gear that allows us to do our maximum potential damage rotation. And these are the plus 25% base divinity gloves. Okay. So if you don't have these gloves, you cannot do your full max potential for a minute-long fight. Okay. If you were just doing an artifact call, which I'll get to later, you don't need all 25% of the extra base divinity to do the full damage. But like I said, we'll get to that later. So these gloves, there's two versions. These ones come from Master the Imperial Citadel, and the other ones are going to come from Master Defense of the Moon Dancer. Give you an idea what they look like here in collections. So again, these are from Master of the Imperial Citadel. You can see that there in the bottom right where he says you can find this in. And then the other gloves are going to be the same 25%, but you don't get the extra 2.5% forte from these ones. And they're lower item level and they give less stats. And again, this is from the Master Defense of the Moon Dancer. Unfortunately, the Master Defense of the Moon Dancer gloves you cannot buy from a Bad Luck Protection store for the trial. The only way to get these are from killing the boss and getting them as drops, which I do not recommend trying to do. The Imperial Citadel gloves, however, you can buy from the Dungeon Merchant on Moonrocath. They just cost AD and dungeon and campaign currency, or you could get them from the first boss of Master of the Imperial Citadel. That's the only place they drop, okay? Unfortunately, many people don't do this dungeon anymore, so it's kind of hard to get the gloves. But again, if you're looking for that max potential damage, I highly recommend trying your best to get these gloves. And from what it sounds like from various sources, it doesn't seem like Cryptic is willing to reissue these gloves in a higher item level for whatever reason. Alright, enough about that. So weapons, as all DPS use in endgame, we got the weapons from Master Soul Harvest, the celestial ones. My modifications on these are Lance of Faith by 10% on the main hand, and then offhand I've got Power and Action Point Gain. Again, for the alternatives, if you don't have at least the mythic versions of these weapons, I would just run the new ones. I don't have them here, unfortunately, but go into collections. Just run the Biting Cold ones, the Jotun's Scar ones. You know, they're going to give you a bunch of item level, a bunch of stats. It's fine. Not going to be a big difference. And then boots. I am using the percent damage boots from MSOD. Unfortunately, these don't really work very well on an Arbiter since we don't attack very fast. But the alternatives to this one, I would just use, if you need the crit strike, I would use the MJS ones here, where it's a stacker for crit strike, gives you 9% after 25 seconds. And then if you don't have those, just use the mythic MSOD boots for the 15% total stats, mixed between power, crit strike, and crit severity. So for the neck and the waist, these ones haven't changed in forever, just like the gloves. So these are going to be the Scintillant set, the Amulet, and the Sash. These are the Masterwork ones. You can either have a Master Crafter craft for you, or you can just go ahead and buy them on the auction house. They are not cheap, but they're very worth it. So these ones will give you a bunch of intelligence, which again increases our magical damage boost, and then we'll also give you 15% recharge and 7.5% accuracy when the bonus is at its full potential. Some alternatives for this one, if you really can't afford the Scintillant, I would go for the Detector set. It's not great, but it's a good alternative. The Detectors is going to give you combat advantage, forte, and also if you're using the artifact as part of the set as a main artifact, it's going to give you some extra crit severity. But again, highly recommend getting the Masterwork Scintillant set if you can. Rings, the Wrath and the Initiative. So the Wrath is the accuracy stacker. It also gives you combat advantage and accuracy with the Amethyst and the Aquamarine enchantments. And then the Initiative is going to be combat advantage with extra crit strike and crit severity with the Jade and the Fire Agate. Alternatives to these two, if you can't go into MJS or you just don't have the time, replacing the Initiative, I would just go with the MSOD ring, the Bloodlit Veil. They have come down in price. They're still a bit pricey. If you can't afford that, then you can also go for the Master Template Spider Ring, which I don't have on me right now. So we'll go into collections, see if we can find it. Oh boy, bear with me here. I think I'm gonna find it. Oh, duh. Probably North Dark, huh? Told you, no cuts. Alright, here it is. Nope, this is not it either. Oh man, that's great. Here it is. Look. Not that one. There we go. Look at that. We found her. I would go with the Isla Stray's Beauty. It's almost the exact same ring as the Initiative, just a little bit less combat advantage by 1%. It's got a lot less item level. But again, if you can't afford the other rings, maybe this one is okay to go for. And then the Wrath ring, if you're going to replace the helmet with the accuracy helmet, then I would recommend going with the Wrought Steel Coil of Blight for extra crit severity. It's pretty cheap, pretty good ring. That's what I would recommend on that one. And then shirt and pants, I've got the Titan Weave harness for both the shirt and the pants there. They give crit strike, crit severity, and power. Okay, so it's going to help you cap your stats here. Alternatives, you can remain with the MSOD shirt and pants, which are still very good. The Bloodwoven, let's see, which are they? The Signs. Yeah, the Signs for the extra damage. And then the Sigils for the extra combat advantage. And again, if you replace these, you'll have to finagle your stats in the back end here to help you cap the stats. And then my enhancements, these are all I'm using. You can see here I've got the amethyst, the aquamarine, the jade, and the fire agate. So those 4 satisfy the requirements for these 2 celestial rings for the additional stats there. And then for the overloads, using Rage of Flames and Devil's Precision. Those really don't ever get changed out for my build. Combat enchantment, using the Celestial Swift Energy for the extra combat advantage and the crit sev. And then movement speed bonus for the bonus enchantment. And primary artifact, got the sensor going on. I like to play in melee range, so I love using sensor because I'm pretty much there already, so the range on the artifact doesn't really affect me. And then for my secondary artifacts, or the stat sticks, I'm using the 2 defense ones, so the Sealing Parchment and the Crimson Calamity. Also using the offense one for the Demon Skull. So the really cool thing about these 3 artifacts is the combined rating is the same as the total item level of the artifact. So what does that mean? So when you see combined rating on a piece of gear, it can be an artifact, or it can be an enchantment, or a piece of gear. They all have a combined rating. So what that means is when you equip this one specifically, so the 2600 combined rating, that means that you're going to get 2600 stats in everything you see here on the right. Okay, that's going to increase all these stats by 2600. And the reason why it's so cool is because not all artifacts have the same combined rating as their item level. So this one, I'll give you an example here. So if we do the Beacon of Meteor Swarm, you can see the combined rating is 1275, right? And the overall item level is 1500. So that means when you equip this Beacon of Meteor Swarm, you are going to lose 225 ratings from all these stats. Okay, they're going to go down by 225 points, other than what is actually on the artifact. So for this one, we get crit sev, crit strike, and combat advantage. So those 3 are going to go up. Those are going to increase. But the rest of the stats are going to decrease because the combined rating is not the same as the item level. That is a big thing to look out for, okay? Also, these 2 defense ones, they also give 15% stam regen, so for a total of 30% regen, which is just great. Love the extra stamina regen. Okay, so we'll go back to the guide here. So with all my gear and everything procced in combat in a group, this is what I'm looking at for all my stats here. So you can see I'm capping everything at the max hard cap. So power is over 120%. Accuracy, we got over 90%. Combat advantage is 120. Crit strike is 90, and crit severity is 120. So we are fully maxed on every offensive stat there. And then typically our group companions for the groups I run with, we got Black Death Scorpion for the combat advantage. We got Drist for the extra percent multiplicative damage. Flapjack and Tutor for the extra 5% damage each, so a total of 10%, and then Spine Devil for an extra debuff, which increases damage to the boss. And then I have a few variants here for you guys. So I've got Night Flame Sensor as my main artifact, and then I've got the Demogorgon's Reach variant for you guys, just to show you how I kind of balance those stats versus different artifacts in my primary artifact slot here. And then also have the Crystal of Soul's Flight, which are the big 3 pretty much in every dungeon nowadays. All right, so going down, I got my AoE build. You know, it's pretty similar. You can see a few differences. For AoE, you're not really waiting for any of these stats to proc for the timers. So I've switched out the helmet for the constant combat advantage for the MSOD helm. I've switched out the Wrath ring, which was, as you remember, the accuracy stacker ring. So this arcane ring actually is a movement ring. So go ahead and equip it here, you can see it. So as you move, your accuracy is going to be increased by 6%. Or sorry, your crit strike is increased by 6.5%. You get static accuracy at 6%. So you see here about 80%. As I move a little bit, it's going to increase that by 6.5% there. And that's going to last for about 6 seconds. So that's ideal for AoE since you're always moving. And then I've also changed out the shirt and the pants for the extra % damage. So the shirt is the Stormbind one, where if you crit with your powers, 10% chance to gain 5% damage for 10 seconds. And then the pants are actually just going to give you combat advantage. So 8% every time you you hit an enemy there. So that's all in there. Again, tables for the gear I'm using, the bonuses they give you when you equip them, and where you can get them, the location they're at. And then again, also just a few alternatives if you can't get the gear I'm using. Okay, now as I was talking about the gloves before, how they're very important for the Arbiters for the base damage or the base divinity increase. There are currently about 3 types. You got the 15% increase, you got the 20% increase, and you got the 25% increase, okay? So I've already told you where you get the 25% increase ones, so these are where you get the other ones here. So again, 15% arms, you can get it from Advanced Jotun Scar or the Auction House. They can drop unbound. Advanced Layer of the Mad Dragon, or you can buy them from the Seals Trader, which is what I would just recommend as the cheapest option, especially if you're starting a new Arbiter, just to get extra div gloves, which will help you out a lot in your rotations, both in single target and in a multi-target. 20% arms, a couple places to get them. Legendary ones, Advanced Soul Harvest or Advanced Dread Sanctum. I'm not sure why that didn't spell out. Have to fix that. And then the Mythic arms you get from the Master Dread Sanctum or Master Lair of the Mad Dragon. All right, so now we'll move on to enhancements here. Artifacts. We've talked about the artifacts. Again, the big 3, Demogorgon's Reach, Night Flame Sensor, and Crystal of Soul's Flight. In most dungeons, those are the big 3 that every DPS is going to use, okay? And then other artifacts that can be useful, especially for DPS, the Beacon of Meteor Swarm, it's an AoE artifact, and then Marco's Mystic Marker, my apologies. Those 2 are very popular with DPSs. So I would recommend if you, as DPS, try to get one of these 5 as fast as you can. And then for supports, these are really the main 3 for supports, the Zealous Blast Scepter, Mythallar Fragment, and Dragonbone Blades. So your tanks and healers are typically going to use 2 of those 3 if they have them, with the most recommended ones being those 2, the Zealous Blast Scepter and the Mythallar Fragment. All right, so let's go to the powers page. So you can see here I've got my single target and my multi-target or AoE powers page here. So we'll go ahead and describe why I'm using each power, what they're good at, why I'm not using the rest of the powers, that kind of thing here, okay? So we're going to start with at-wills. So we got, like every other DPS class, we got 4 at-wills. We got Sacred Flame, Scattering Light, Lance of Faith, and Conflagrate. So Scattered Flame, or Sacred Flame, sorry, it's going to deliver a 3-fold attack to target enemy. It's going to take a long time. It has a pretty high magnitude, but it's not really useful, okay? Scattering Light, it's more of an AoE. It's fine. It's going to increase Burning Judgment by 1, which is fine. Sacred Flame increases Radiant Judgment by 1, which is fine. However, we're going to want to use the ones with the highest magnitude and the fastest cast time. So Lance of Faith is going to be our main at-will. That's going to increase Burning Judgment, and I'll describe what Burning Judgment is later. And then for our secondary, or our second at-will, we're going to use Conflagrate. Now, we are not really going to use this one for damage. We're going to use Conflagrate for its capabilities of regenerating divinity. So you can see under the added effects, it's going to increase your Radiant Judgment by 3, which is going to help you regen your divinity a lot faster if you're low. So that's why I use these two. Again, Lance of Fate is going to be your main one, and Conflagrate is going to be the one you use mostly to regen divinity. In terms of powers for single target, what is pretty much the meta here is you're always going to use Forge Master's Flame, you're going to use Daunting Light, and you're going to use Prophecy of Doom. Okay. These other ones, Gaius, it's more like a debuff, not really helpful for single target, so I would not use that one. Bastion of Health is just a healing circle, not useful for DPS players. Divine Glow, it doesn't even do damage, so there's no point in using it. It's going to reduce your threat by half. You're going to gain divinity regeneration. Don't really need that as an Arbiter. You'll see why later. Sunburst, this one has very limited uses. The only time I would use this one is if I was in the Imperial Citadel, I was in first boss, and no one else on the team either knew how to or could control the snake from getting to the main boss. So this one is just like a CC. It'll push back enemies. So that's really the only time you would use it. Or if you want to troll, you can use it in dungeons where you have mobs coming at you, and you can blow back all the mobs, and you can make it even more difficult for people to hit the mobs with their AoEs because they'll be so spread out from your Sunburst. I've seen that happen way too many times. Searing Javelin, this is one of our mainstay for our AoEs, so it's not really useful in single target against one enemy. So that's why we don't use that, but again, this is a mainstay for AoE. And then Chains of Blazing Light, this is similar to the Searing Javelin, where this is almost a strictly AoE power. So we'll just use this in AoE, not ST. It's a root, it's a CC power, has a pretty low magnitude, but it also, when it's combined with Doomsayer, it'll increase the damage of your next encounters for 10 seconds. Break the Spirit. Now, this one is a tricky one, so we are typically not going to use this. This is a single target power. It can be used as a single target power. I would not use this over Prophecy of Doom, which is what these two kind of compete over with. So this one is going to give you an extra 10% damage against targets from magical and projectile attacks, which again were magical. This is going to be mainly used for artifact calls or enemies that are not going to survive for more than 10 seconds, because it takes about 10 seconds for a Prophecy of Doom to go off. So I would only use Break the Spirit. Maybe if you're solo and you're fighting a boss, that's not going to last 10 seconds. Or if you're in a group, which again, if the artifact call is not going to last more than 10 seconds, you can use Break the Spirit to get some of that damage back. Or maybe if you're on a debuff roll, maybe you don't know how to use Arbiter very well, and your team has asked you to use it. I guess that'd be another instance of using it. But I would say 95% of the time, you're just going to use Prophecy of Doom. So what Prophecy of Doom does is you're going to put it on your enemy, and all damage you do in the 10 seconds that this Prophecy of Doom is on that enemy, it doesn't even have to be on the enemy you put Prophecy of Doom on. It's going to store 30% of almost all that damage, total damage that you're doing, and it's going to do a big hit at the end of the 10 seconds. Okay, so this is very important. This is very, very effective in Master Jotun-Scar first boss, because you're putting Prophecy of Doom either on the Remoraz or one of the Basilisks, and you're using AoE powers on the enemies. And every single tick of damage you do on any enemy is going to increase the effectiveness of Prophecy of Doom. It just goes nuts. It's awesome. In terms of dailies for single targets, again, mostly you're going to use Flame Strike. It's going to do the most damage, and it's the easiest to use with your rotation, which we'll get to later. Always recommend using Flame Strike, especially on a non-mobile boss. If the boss is just going to stay in one spot for a majority of the fight, perfect. That's great. However, if the boss moves a lot and for some reason maybe the tank moves it away from your flame strike, which happens quite a bit, I would just use Guardian of Faith. It's a good single target, 1700 magnitude daily power, pretty good. And it's also going to line up very well with our rotation, which again you'll see later. Other daily powers, Hallowed Ground, it's a heal, not really useful. It's also DR, damage reduction. Celestial Prominence is an AoE power, not really useful in ST, single target. And then Hammer of Fate, this is a single target power, but because its magnitude is increased by Burning Judgment, it is not effective in our single target rotation. And why Cryptic thought that slightly buffing Hammer of Fate was a good idea when they did their Arbiter changes, no idea. So we're not going to touch that one. Alright, so class mechanics, we got the typical dodge, and we got the tab for divinity. If you hit your tab button, you're going to restore some divinity. You can also hold tab down to regenerate AP points when maybe the boss is phasing somewhere or you just can't do any damage to the boss. Just hold down that tab, regen your div, or your AP. And then we have Scales of Judgment. So, what is Scales of Judgment? So, Scales of Judgment is your bar on the right side here. There's going to be 6 little pips here, okay? Every damaging encounter that you do is going to increase one of 2 types of judgment, okay? There's going to be Burning Judgment, and there's going to be Radiant Judgment. So Radiant Judgment is going to be yellow, and Burning Judgment is going to be kind of like an orangish red. So if we look at a damaging power, like Searing Javelin, it says added effect. It's going to increase Radiant Judgment, okay? So each fire damage skill is going to increase the other damage judgment. So every fire damage skill is going to increase a Radiant Judgment. And then every Radiant damage skill is going to increase a Burning Judgment skill, okay? So again, Searing Javelin is going to increase Radiant Judgment. So if we do a Searing Javelin, you can see we have our Radiant Judgment increased by 1, okay? And this goes all the way up to 6, right? So if you keep using Searing Javelin, it's going to keep increasing by 1 unless you get Sudden Verdict, which we'll go over a little bit. So that's all 6, that's max. And then you'll see when you hit your tab for Divinity, it's going to consume all those pips. And, consuming 1 pip is going to give you less Divinity than consuming 2, 3, 4, you get the idea. The more pips you have, the more Divinity you are going to regen as you hit the tab button, okay? Also, not just increase div regen, the more pips you have, the more potential damage your encounters that consume those pips will do. So give an example. So again, we'll do Searing Javelin, increase that Radiant Judgment right there, right? If we use a Radiant skill, like Daunting Light, it's going to consume that yellow, and it's also going to increase the magnitude of this power, okay? So we'll go ahead and look at the tables I made here in the guide. So again, you have your Judgment gauge on the right, Divinity gauge on the left. So these powers, these are the total magnitude potential of your damaging encounters and dailies when they're paired up with their correct judgments, okay? So again, we were just using Daunting Light. Daunting Light is a Radiant damage skill, which means it's going to be amplified if you have Burning Judgments in your Scales of Judgment gauge, okay? So, I'm sorry. Scratch that, reverse it. Daunting Light this is the power of no cuts, right? Your Daunting Light is increased by your Burning Judgment pips, right? So if I'm going to use a fire damage skill like a Forge Master's Flame or a Searing Javelin, that's going to increase my number of Radiant Judgment pips. It's down here, right? So each pip is going to give me 100 extra magnitude for that power. So Daunting Light at 6 Radiant Judgment pips goes up to 1050 magnitude for that power. Okay. And you see here, these powers can get high. Like this Forge Master's Flame, it's a fire damage skill, so it's increased by Burning Judgment pips, right? If you have all 6 pips for Burning Judgment for Forge Master's Flame, that's gonna be 1370 magnitude for one encounter. That is the highest encounter damage among any DPS. Yeah, it can be a lottery, as we'll see here in a little bit when I talk about the feats, but these damage numbers can get very high as Arbiter, which is why Arbiter is one of the top single target damage dealers in the game currently. If you hit all of these encounters, we get 10 encounters for our artifact call. If all 10 of those encounters are all with 6 pips of their respective magnitudes here, like you get 5 of these and then 5 of these in your call, that's going to be a huge freaking call. That's going to be crazy. You're going to be red egger all day. So, yeah, Arbiter is crazy potential. Although, it usually doesn't work that way, but it can. It can get really crazy, right? All right, so now let's talk about some of the class features here, okay? So we got a bunch of them here. Most of them don't really make sense, like Soothing Prayer. When you channel Divinity, you receive a heal over time. We don't need that. We've got healers for that. Hollowed Armor, 5% less damage from all sources. Not really effective. It's not going to save you. Pilgrim's Light, deal 5% more damage when no party members nearby. Yeah, it can be okay, but the percent number is so low, it's not going to really make a difference. It's not going to be better than these other feats here that we have selected. Again, so this is single target. So for single target, what I recommend is Expanded Faith is going to increase your max divinity by 150, which is going to allow you to do your max potential rotations both in your artifact call and also in your sustained damage. Critical Insight, when you critically strike, you recover 10 div. 10 div is not very much. You can see Forge Master's Flame costs 300 div to even cast. So what's 10 div is just drop in the bucket. Doomsayer. Now, there has been some back and forth with many players. Some players prefer to use Doomsayer over Divine Equilibrium, but if you look at the math, which I'll show you here in a second, it's in the build guide. Divine Equilibrium, on average, is going to give you more damage than your Doomsayer would in both an artifact call and in your sustained damage. Okay, so go ahead and just look at that table here. So this is just the artifact call, Doomsayer versus Divine Equilibrium. So just to kind of give you an idea of what Divine Equilibrium does is, so when your divinity gets to 50%, it's going to increase your damage dealt by 15%. Okay, so if you're at full div or you're at 0 div, you are not going to get any percent increase in damage. But as you get closer to that 50% mark, it's going to increase it up to 15%. And then Doomsayer is going to be flat 10% damage increase. Again, this is all additive damage, by the way. It's not multiplicative. So you get an extra 10% additive damage whenever you put in a counter power that inflicts a negative condition on an enemy. Now, negative conditions are going to be your Chains of Blazing Light, your Break the Spirit, and also your Prophecy of Doom. Okay? Those are the main 3 that we would even use with that class feature. So again, Doomsayer is a static 10% whenever we're going to use Prophecy of Doom, and then Divine Equilibrium is going to be a constant You don't need to use anything for it. It just depends on where your divinity amount is when you're using a certain power. So if we look at the guide here, you can see the table. So we have the magnitude of our encounter powers that we're going to use. So this first one is going to be Forge Master's Flame, denoted here as FF, and then Daunting Light. And those are the only two encounters we're going to use for the entire call. And then we have our Owlbear mount. So our Forge Master's Flame, when you start out at full div, we're going to have the magnitude is going to be 770, right? So you can see here, 770 for under magnitude. And then your Daunting Light. Now you're saying, well, why is Daunting Light at 550? Well, it's because whenever you use a Forge Master's Flame first, it's going to increase your Radiant Judgment by 1, right? And your Daunting Light is magnified by, it says 40 here, but you'll see later it's actually 100. It's magnified by 100 magnitude for every Radiant Judgment that you have. So we'll use Forge Masters, we'll get that at least one Radiant Judgment to increase our Daunting Light by 100 magnitude, okay? So these are the magnitudes here. Your Owlbear is going to be 1000, your mount's going to be 4332 on non-CCable bosses. And so you can see here the Doomsayer, it's a static 10%, right? 1.10. We're adding 10% damage to all of our magnitudes here. And that's going to come out to be about 13,455 total magnitude when there is only one Radiant or one Burning Judgment pip for each of these encounters, okay? The numbers will change if you get a Sudden Verdict and you get all 6 pips on one of these encounters, but just for argument's sake, we're going to make it all even here. Then for Divine Equilibrium, as I said, when we're at full div or when we're at 0 div, it's not going to be any % damage increase. So when we start our artifact call, we're most likely going to be at full divinity, okay? Which is not going to be any % increase in our damage. But as we use encounters, as you'll see here, I'm just going to go ahead and just use a couple random encounters here. Our div bar is going to go lower. And as it gets closer to that 50% mark, it's going to do the extra 15% damage for the maximum damage there. So as we use encounters, as we get closer to half div, we're going to see damage increase from Divine Equilibrium. Okay, and it gets up to like 13.9. This is rounded here with the table, but the calculations here are using the 13.9 number. And so it's going to increase our magnitudes by that %. So again, 13.9 times 1000 is going to be 1139, right? So all in all things being equal, your Divine Equilibrium is going to be 28 magnitude more than your Doomsayer, okay? And again, if you get Sudden Verdict procs on various different times of the artifact call, it could push it towards Doomsayer, or it'll keep it in Divine Equilibrium. It just it all comes down to where it procs on these, okay? But again, I think that overall, in the long run, you're going to get more damage in your artifact call from Divine Equilibrium versus Doomsayer. Assuming that you use your mount and Owlbear at about half div. So you get the most % damage increase from Divine Equilibrium. Okay. Then here's another table. This is the sustained damage. So sustained damage is going to be anything outside of an artifact call. So you can see the % damage increases based on your divinity that you're going to get throughout the entire sustained damage portion, which is typically about 50 seconds or so in between artifact calls. And then your Doomsayer, like I said, you have to put Prophecy of Doom or some other negative encounter on an enemy for it to go off, for it to proc, right? So you can see here, these first 6 encounters, or the first 6 damaging things here, they're not going to be buffed by Doomsayer because our Prophecy of Doom is on cooldown. But once we use it, we get that 10% on the next 10 encounters, okay? And then once it goes off, we lose it again on the next 6 encounters, okay? So again, overall, all things being equal, where we have one pip, one Burning Judgment or one Radiant Judgment affecting our Forge Master's Flame and our Daunting Light, Divine Equilibrium over the sustained damage portion is actually going to be about 400 magnitude more than Doomsayer would be. And then you total the two up, you get the 28 from the artifact call and the 398 from the sustained damage is going to be a total of approximately 426 extra magnitude from Divine Equilibrium versus Doomsayer. And I'm going to reiterate, if you have your Sudden Verdict proc on, any number of these numbers here, depending on what your Divine Equilibrium percent is, it could swing it toward Doomsayer, it could keep it in Divine Equilibrium, but overall, as you do more damage, as you play the game more, I would suspect that it's going to average out to be better in Divine Equilibrium versus Doomsayer. Okay? Alright, so now let's get down to feats here. We're almost done with the powers page. So, powers page for feats, fortunately for Arbiter, the AoE multi-target and the single target are the exact same. So you can easily and effortlessly change your power sets from ST to AoE and not worry about losing any damage potential because they're all the same. So your first one, Light Speed, your Searing Javelin is going to grant the effect of Light Speed, and Light Speed enhances your Daunting Light. So it's going to actually increase your Burning Judgment by 1. So whenever, with this feat on, whenever you use Javelin, you can see it highlighted there for Daunting Lights increased. It's going to actually give you an extra pip. Well, I gave you something very good help. So Javelin Daunting gives you 2 pips instead of 1, and that's what the Light Speed is going to do for you. So that's very convenient, especially for first boss MGS. And this is versus Piercing Javelin. I'm not going to go through all these. It's in the comprehensive guide, but the ones we don't pick, they're not picked for very specific reasons, and these ones are just not good. It's just you can read about it. Just always do these 5, okay? If you want your max damage for Arbiter, just do these 5. Again, here in the guide, I have reasonings for picking one over the other, and as you read, it's pretty obvious. All right, now we get to go to perfect balance. Oh boy. So this is going to be the bread and butter of the Arbiter single target and multi-target power rotations. So let's go ahead and read it. So encounter powers which generate Radiant Judgment now grant Radiant Shift. And similarly, if you grant Burning Judgment, it's going to grant you Burning Shift. And both of these shifts stack up to 4 times, and they give you an increase in percent damage dealt by 1% per shift, right? So a total of 8%. And these shifts last 60 seconds. And if you exceed either Radiant Shift or Burning Shift by more than 1 stack, it is going to reset your perfect balance. So what does that mean? Let me show you. So again, on your power bar, you're going to want 1 of each damage type, 1 fire type, 1 radiant type, because that's going to alternate between your burning shift and your radiant shift. So we're going to use Javelin here, fire type, and that's going to increase your burning shift, right? You just use a fire type move, increase your burning shift, okay? And that's 1 stack. It's going to last for 60 seconds until you use another burning shift or burning judgment power, fire power. So after we use the fire power, we're going to use a radiant power. So we got Daunting Light. You see up here, we've got radiant shift now, the yellow one. So burning shift, radiant shift, 1 stack of each. Okay. We're going to use another fire damage. Now you see 2 stacks. Let's reset the timer back to 60 seconds for the burning shift. Okay? But that doesn't reset the timer for the radiant shift. Right? They're both independent of each other. So now we'll go ahead and do a radiant one. Right? You see 2 and 2. As you alternate these power types and these shift types, when you get to 4 of each, it's going to reset your div. It's going to fill up your div meter all the way, okay? So we'll go ahead and do fire, radiant, 3-3, fire, radiant. And you can see perfect balance procced, and your divinity is now at full again, okay? So what happens if you exceed more than 1 stack difference between burning shift or radiant shift? Well, let's find out. So we got burning shift, radiant shift, burning shift, radiant shift. We have 2 of each. We'll do now 2 more burnings, and oh crap, our stacks have gone away and we're at half div. So now we got to play the game of stacking back up those shifts. It's like, oh shoot, I'm using 2 burnings again. Oh, now my stacks are gone again and I'm at almost 0 div. So now you got to regen your div. You got to waste your potential damage. So it's always a good idea to make sure either you're remembering which number shift you're on, or just look up the top left or wherever your hours are here, and just see what shift number you're at, right? So you're always going to want to try to do alternate between the 2. Burning radiant, div, hit your tab button, burning radiant. 4 stacks of each, perfect balance. We've got full div again. Then we can continue doing our powers, right? So just remember, always on your power bar, have at least one radiant, at least one burning, one radiant, 1 fire damage skill, to increase your radiance and burning shift. And just make sure you're alternating those 2 so you're not more than 1 stack ahead of each other, so you cancel out those shifts, all right? And if you want to read further, you can go ahead and read further here. Okay. Fun stuff over. Let's talk about boons now. So if you look here, this is what I use for my endgame build for the boons here. But if I were just starting out and I only had, let's say, I don't know, 70 to 80 boons, what would I use? Well, here's how I would start out. I would start with power and crit strike. Okay, so that'll give me the 10 boons required to get to the next step. I would do more power, more crit strike. Gets me to the next step, next tier. More power. Let's just back up here a second. When you get to 10 boons spent, you can actually start your master boon buying. So the first master boon you should buy is always Bloodlust for the DPS. So because we're only at 20 total spent, we can only use 1 boon point on that master. So we'll keep going till we get to 30, so more power, and then we'll do combat advantage, and now we're at 30 total spent, so we can do 1 more on the master boon. So we'll do 2 on Bloodlust. And then we'll do more power, and we'll do accuracy. So now we're only at 40, but it costs 45 to start your advanced boons. So what I would do now is, you can pick some of these 3 here. I think in the guide here. Yeah, so you can see here what I do here. So at 40, we'll go 5 points in the marathon runner. Didn't save it. Redo it here. Okay, let's count those. So we got those first 40 spent. We'll do 5 in a marathon runner to make you zoom faster. And then the very first advanced boon that I would go for, as you're at 45, would be the AP and then Forte. So marathon runner, and then we'll go. So before we get these advanced boons, you can see that for some reason these advanced boons are costing various amounts when they all should be costing 1 for your very first advanced boon. So if you see this bug, do not pick the boons yet. What you need to do is find the lowest cost boon. So in this case, it's either the Master Class or the Blessed Touch. Increase by 1, decrease by 1. You can see these numbers change now. Instead of 4, it's 3, right? So go to the next lowest one. Increase 1, decrease 1. They've now decreased to 2. Do one more time. Increase 1, decrease 1. And they're back to where they should be. Okay? Make sure you be aware of that before you go ahead and waste boon points. Now what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and do 4 into AP. And now you see when I put the 4 in there, these have now increased to 2. But this one's still 1, right? So we'll do the same trick, increase 1, decrease 1, to get them down to 1. So we'll get the AP, and then we'll get the Forte. Now these should increase to 2 after the first 2 ones, so that's normal. Alright, so now we're at 50 boon points. We're going to continue to increase the Forte. Just going to commit those changes there. And then next boon point, what we're going to do is we're going to do Demonic Mastery and Lingering Medicine for the next 7. So Demonic Mastery here increases your damage and damage resistance against fiends. And then we're going to do... so we actually have 60 here. Actually, you get 3 here, so we can spend our last Master boon point. Over there in Bloodlust. Finish off Demonic Mastery. We'll go ahead and do Lingering Medicine, which could increase your healing pots. How about your healers? So it's always important. Okay, so we're at 67 spent totally. No comment. After that, so we've got our Master Boon all maxed out. We got our Lingering Medicine all maxed out. Then we're going to do the next advanced boon point is going to be Recharge Speed. Do 6 points in there. Actually going to just go ahead and see, we got the thing here again. Increase, decrease. Gonna fill that one out. And then lastly, we're gonna do another Master Boon. 6 points into Blessed Advantage. And 3 points into Blessed Resilience, since we've already maxed out our recharge speed here. So we're gonna max out Blessed Advantage and do 1 on Blessed Resilience. So Blessed Advantage, we're gonna max that out. Do 1 on Blessed Resilience. Now that should be 80. It says I spent 88. So it's just it's these advanced boons bugging out. It's a known bug. It's been here for years, unfortunately. Your new character, hopefully it shouldn't be bugged out for you, but if it is bugged out, just be aware of it. Okay. So again, here's that boon page for you. If you've only got about 80 boons to go, or 80 boons to work with, that's what I would do. Stronghold boons. Got accuracy, defense, and revive sickness. And a little trick, if your guild has the treasure hunter boon, what you can do is switch this back here to Wrath. And I have to leave and come back actually for it to work. Hopefully not a long load screen.
I hope you like jamming too.
Actually, we should do it here. So you can see my stats are at 143, 153 for crit strike, crit severity. If you do this, if you go to Treasure Hunter and switch it to any other boon here in utility, those are all going to increase by 1,000. All your stats are increased by 1,000. So that's a nice little trick you can do here if you have Treasure Hunter. Go back in here. Okay, now let's get to companions here. So companions, we'll start with the companion enhancements.
They don't call me Flapjack for nothing.
I always recommend, no matter if you're a DPS or you're a tank or healer, always select a debuff enhancement. And the three I would recommend most are Armor Break for the minus defense on the opponent, Dulled Senses for minus awareness on the opponent, and Vulnerability for the minus critical avoidance on the opponent. Okay, those are in order of importance. So Armor Break first, Dulled Senses second, Vulnerability third. If the DPS in your group they can't cap accuracy, and maybe they're more than 5% or so away from accuracy, it wouldn't hurt to put on slowed reactions. If I can find it here. Slowed reactions here. So slowed reaction is going to reduce the enemy's deflect. Now reducing the deflect is only effective if the DPS or any other player in your party has an accuracy less than 90%. If your accuracy is 90%, it's capped, then the enemy's deflect has no effect on you or your damage. But if your accuracy is less than 90%, the enemy can deflect a portion of your damage based on the difference between a maxed accuracy and a non-maxed accuracy. Okay? So I wouldn't really recommend slowed reactions ever, but if your DPS are low in accuracy, it can help out. And in terms of actually active companions in my companion slots here, pretty standard stuff. For the 3 damage companions, got the Batiri for the extra damage against bosses. We got Minsk for the extra damage against strong enemies, and Neverwinter Knight for the extra damage just overall to all enemies. Using Golden Cat to help cap my combat advantage, and then using Raptor for the extra personal 4.5% power, and then when I'm in a group with everyone using a Raptor, it goes up to a total of 22.5% power, which includes your own, right? And then for summoned companions, what I would recommend, what my group does, is we use Black Death Scorpion for constant combat advantage as long as he's alive. We got Drist for the extra 3% multiplicative damage, not additive, multiplicative. And we got Flapjack and Tutor for extra 5% from each, for a total of 10% for the group. And then the Spined Devil for extra % damage as a debuff when the Spined Devil attacks an enemy. You can use Portobello Da Vinci if your DPS are lacking in both power and combat advantage, since Porto gives a total of 3.5% of each for 7% total stats. But if your DPS are currently capping one of the two, either power or combat advantage, then it's not really worth running Porto to cap the other stat. So I would always recommend replacing Porto with Spine Devil in that instance. So you can see that my companions, and just a little blurb about each one, where you can find them. And also, Minsk died in the Baldur's Gate series, so he should not be alive. So take him out of the game. Some of the companions, we went along that. Again, the 5, Flapjack, Tutor, Black Death Scorpion, Spine Devil, Drist. And then other useful companions, especially if you're running a trial, which will be the next mod 34. So we'll do a trial. So Porto, Blue Fire Eye, gives crit strike %. Etrian and Harper Bard are the same bonus. They don't stack. They give crit strike and power, 2% each. Captain Elena Sartell, she'll give you AP, Gen, and also critical severity. And then some more nuanced ones, which probably won't use unless your team is struggling for heals. Cyclops War Drummer and Brunor Battlehammer, they give reducing total DR or incoming damage, so 3% each there. And then this is for AoE. You can see here. Go ahead and switch to AoE loadout here. It's doing the stupid thing. Whatever. We'll just look at the guide here. So I switch up a few things. You don't really need a companion enhancement for debuff and AoE since things die so fast. Your companion won't even get probably enough hit on it to proc the enhancement for the debuff. So I just go Enduring Senses for the extra 6% constant combat advantage. I switch out Batiri for Spine Devil. Spine Devil is actually really good on Arbiter since all of our attacks are essentially encounters. It can get up to an actual total of 10% of your total damage when it's procced really nicely. So I switch it out for Batiri since we're not really killing bosses in the AoE portions. And then I switch out Minsk. Minsk only is effective, I think, over 3-star enemies. And a lot of times the enemies you're going to face are 3-star or under. So I just replace that with Phase Spider for extra stats. And then I switch out Golden Cat for Cold Lightwalker for Crit Strike and Crit Sev. And I keep the other two, the Raptor and the Neverwinter Knight. And again, you can see what they provide here and kind of where to get them if you're interested. Okay, now let's go to mounts here. So the mount combat power, I am using Infernal Pounce. This is, you can see here, well, you can't see here, but this is a physical mount damage. And you're probably asking, why would I choose a physical mount versus a magical mount, since Arbiters, they try to stack intelligence, which increases your magical damage boost? Well, the reason is the Infernal Pounce here, it gives the most amount of total magnitude out of any mount. So it's just a no-brainer to use this. Even though it's physical, you're going to get the most damage from this mount than you would any other magical mount in most circumstances. There is a circumstance where maybe you have no classes that are increasing incoming physical damage to the bosses, and you have a wizard there that is using Ray of Enfeeblement on Tab and also Swath in their class feats, which will increase magical damage. That would probably be the only situation where you'd want to use a magical mount, and that would be something like the giant toad here, or the golden touch and the golden warhorse, or maybe even a tunnel vision, right? Either one of those three would be good for magical, but only use it in that situation. Every other situation, just go ahead and use the Infernal Pounce. And then the equip power, I'm using Providence, especially for MJS, because there's a constant dot, which is going to increase your overall damage. Using Providence. Every other dungeon, there's no dots. I would just use Ferocity. Not that big of a difference, but Providence goes pretty hard, especially first boss MJS. And if we look at the insignias, here's my insignia bonuses. I got Cavalry's Haste for the lowered cooldown whenever you use a mount, so it's going to lower my Prophecy of Doom cooldown. Guardian Spirit, this is an older build, I think, isn't it? Let's see. Yeah, this is an older build. One of the joys of doing it live. So this would actually be Gladiator's Guile for extra move speed and stam regen. Tactician's Precision to lower your cooldowns of your encounter powers when using a daily power. So again, that would be for my Prophecy of Doom. Oh, there's Gladiators. Whoops. And then Warlords is for just extra companion damage. Just in different locations there. So your Guardian Spirit's going to give you extra HP and extra defense. Just hopefully survive some things that you maybe wouldn't have survived without it. Which can be important, especially as an Arbiter, because our class is punished the most when we die, especially when we are at low div. Because you always seem to die when you are waiting for perfect balance to proc, which then you revive yourself using a scroll, and you're at essentially 0 div, and you have to build that back up, losing all kinds of damage. Good stuff. And then here in the guide, you can see with various builds for the artifacts here, Night Flame, Demogorgon, and Crystal of Soul's Flight, that these are the insignias that I'm going to use, and how many of them and which ones are in the preferred slots. So nice and easy. And then you can see here all my collars I use. Get here just pretty normal ones. Counter power, rough natural diamonds, movement speed, stamina gain, and critical severity. Oh, thank God, 47.58, we're almost there. So, for rotations, one of the most important thing about being an Arbiter, right? You got to make sure you're getting your rotations down, especially for single target. AoE doesn't really matter, but single target, we are using Lance of Faith, Conflagrate, Prophecy of Doom, Forge Master's Flame, and Daunting Light. Very important. All single target enemies, we are going to use this setup. Unless, again, as I said before, if the boss is going to die within 10 seconds or fewer than 10 seconds, just switch out Prophecy of Doom for Break the Spirit. But every other instance, this is what we're going to use. So you can see here I've broken it down into 3 different rotation sets based on which percent gloves you have. So this first rotation is going to be with a 25% base divinity glove increased gloves. Second rotation is with the 20% increased base divinity gloves. And then the last rotation is going to be with the increased of 15% base divinity gloves. And then we also have a sustained rotation. Again, 25% base divinity glove rotation here. We've got the 20% base divinity rotation here. And the plus 15% base divinity glove rotation here. So if we compare and contrast the two, you can see that for the artifact call, there is almost no difference between the 3 different glove sets, assuming that you're using the expanded faith class feature for the extra 150 div. It's for a total of 1400 div for the 25% divinity gloves. So actually, you can, no matter which glove you use, you're going to do a decent amount of damage as long as you perfect the rotation and you get in those 10 encounter powers. Okay. Another thing to notice is that, zoom in here a little bit. If we just look at one of these, we're always going to do our rotations for our artifact call with 2 counts of each shift, 2 burning shift, 2 radiant shift. And we're going to start it with full div. The reason we do that is because 1, we're not going to wait for perfect balance to proc when we get to 4 stacks of each. So it's not going to reduce our potential damage by waiting for that to proc. And 2, if we use 3 encounter powers, so Forge Masters, Daunting, Forge Masters, we're going to be near half div. And that's going to, again, if you're using Divine Equilibrium, that's going to be when your max damage potential is going to be. Okay. So we're at near half div at 4-3. So we've done 3 encounter powers using belt and mount. Our big hitters, our 1000 meg belt and our 4300 meg mount. At half div, get the most potential damage you can, right? And then we're just going to alternate between encounters again until the Prophecy of Doom goes off, which you should be at 3 stacks of each burning shift and radiant shift at that time. Okay. And then here, if you are a person that enjoys using Crystal of Soul's Flight, you can go ahead and use this rotation. I found to be more effective than using this top rotation. And the reason is because the crystal takes longer to activate than most of the other offensive artifacts. And if you insert crystal into this top rotation instead of sensor, you're going to lose out on one of these encounter powers going off in your Prophecy of Doom. So I use crystal before Prophecy of Doom in these rotations here because I want to get all 10 encounters off inside my Prophecy of Doom. So that's why I do that. And then in terms of the differences between the sustained rotations, it's a bit more exaggerated here. As you can see, the 25% div gloves are going to give you a much more streamlined, efficient rotation to achieve the same result versus the 20% and the 15%, right? So you can play around with these. I'll do an example of these rotations here quick, but this is kind of what the difference looks like, okay? So we'll start with the artifact rotations. So we'll do one of the 25, one of the 20, and one of the 15, just to show you the main difference. So we're going to start with the 25% div gloves. So again, main thing to do is we are going to get to 2 stacks of each, burning and radiant shift. So we'll do a fire, we'll do a radiant, we'll do a fire, we'll do a radiant. So we got 2 and 2 here, 2 radiant, 2 burning. Gonna get to full div. So I'm at full 1400 div here. Oh, sorry, switch it back here. Be on single target, 1400. Okay. So we'll do it slow, then we'll do it fast, okay? So we got enemy, we got daily, prophecy of doom, artifact, forge masters, daunting, forge masters, half div, belt, mount, daunting, forge masters, daunting, forge masters, daunting, forge masters, daunting. Again, you should be at 3-3 and near end of your div here, okay? So that was the slow one. So we'll go ahead and just wait for this artifact here to come off cooldown. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and get back to 2 stacks of each here by alternating fire and radiant damage encounters. Hold tab to get back to full divinity, and we'll switch back to our single target powers. Again, Forge Masters, Prophecy of Doom, Daunting Light. Okay, we'll do a fast one now, okay? So we'll go in, daily, Prophecy of Doom, Artifact, Forge Masters, Daunting, Forge Masters, Belt Mount, Daunting, Forge Masters, Daunting, Forge Masters, Daunting, Forge Masters, Daunting. And sometimes it does lag out, which is an unfortunate thing about the training room. But that is essentially the rotation for the 25% gloves. So we'll go ahead now and show you what the 20% gloves look like. Spoiler alert, they look exactly the same. So switch these out, and we'll go ahead and just use any old pair of 25% gloves, doesn't really matter. So again, we'll get back to 2 stacks of each. So our max div with the 25% gloves is 1400. Now our max div here is only 1350 since we lost 5%. 5% of 1,000 is going to be 50. All right, so again, we'll do it fast because the rotation is the exact same, right? So we'll do daily, Prophecy of Doom, Artifact, Forge Masters, Daunting, Forge Masters, Belt Mount, Daunting, Forge Masters, Daunting, Forge Masters, Daunting, Forge Masters, Daunting. So that's that rotation nutshell again. The difference between the 25% and the 20% div gloves is essentially nothing, just where your div ends up being when you use your encounters, because we have 50 less div. And let's see if we can find some 15% gloves. Not looking good. Hey, it is 15%, look at that. Perfect. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and do the 15%. So you can see our total div now is at 1300 since we lost another 5% or another 50 div. Go ahead and get back up to 2 of each. Get our daily back. Get our full div. And we'll look at this rotation here one more time for the 15%. So you can see it's almost the exact same. You just have to tab for divinity before the very last encounter you do here. Okay. Otherwise you won't have enough divinity to do the whole rotation. So go ahead and switch to single targets, get full div, and we got the 15% gloves on. We got 1300 total div. Go ahead and do it. Daily, Artifact, Sword Master, Daunting, Forge Master, Belt Mount, Daunting, Forge Master, Daunting, Forge Master, Daunting, Forge Masters. Yep, and the Daunting there. You see me do the tab there. So the biggest issue with the 15% gloves is that if there's any kind of lag in the dungeon or in the trial, you probably won't be able to get off all 10 encounters. That's the biggest difference. So you can still do a really good chunk of damage with 15% as long as you have the rotation down correctly, but again, don't be surprised if you can't get all 10 encounters in with the 15% gloves. So now we'll do some quick ones for the sustained damage. So we'll put back on the 25% gloves. And now we are looking at these rotations here. So I'll just kind of do it slow here so you guys can see what's going on. And just so you're aware, these rotations were created assuming that there were no sudden verdict procs. And again, we'll go over sudden verdicts here. So a sudden verdict, whenever you use an encounter power, you have a 25% chance to fill up your judgment gauge. So we'll give an example here. So there you go. My Searing Javelin filled up my Radiant Judgment to 6 because of sudden verdicts. So all these rotations were created without using any sudden verdict procs, because as an Arbiter, to get the max potential damage, we are not looking to consume any judgment other than when it's called for in the rotation. So unless you see these blue tab for divinity in your rotation, you are not to consume any pips, otherwise you lose that extra damage from your burning or radiant judgment in your judgment gauge here. Okay. So we'll go ahead and do it slow again. So we'll do a call here quick, and then I'll show you what the sustain looks like for the next minute or so here, okay? So we'll get to 2-2. 2 burning shift, 2 radiant shift. Go ahead and switch back to single target. Okay. Go ahead and do the call. Active belt mounts. Tab, Conflagrate, tab, Forge Masters, tab, Daunting, back up, Forge Masters, Daunting, tab, Conflagrate, tab, Prophecy of Doom, go back into your rotation, alternating between the two. You have to tab at the end, go ahead and tab. All depends on your div regen. Tab, Conflagrate, Forge Masters, Daunting, so you got perfect balance, or sudden verdict there. So I have to do an extra tab. Conflagrate tab. Just alternating here. Tab at the end if you need it. Again, tab, Conflagrate, tab, Forge Masters, tab, Daunting. Back into your rotation. Tab, Conflagrate, tab, rotation again. One more time. Tab, we got sudden verdict there, so you just have to do one tab on the Conflagrate. There you go. And we got that. And just keep going like that. Okay? So that's the sustained damage in a nutshell for the 25% gloves. So now we'll go ahead and switch it over to the 20% gloves. Again, we'll look here. So the difference in the 20% gloves is that after your artifact call, you're doing the exact same rotation with your div and your Conflagrate animation cancel. But when you are about to start your next Prophecy of Doom, instead of doing one Conflagrate between tabs, you're going to do 2 Conflagrates between tabs. Okay? That's the biggest difference. So we'll go ahead and get this started here. We're already at 2-2. So yeah, we can go ahead. We have time. So we'll do a call. 1, 2, 3. Belt mount 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sometimes it lags out. Do conflagrate. There we go. Back there. Boom, boom. Tab, conflagrate. Tab, conflagrate. Prophecy of Doom. Into your rotation. There's 10 for the pod. Tab, we got a verdict there, so it might be okay. Yep, we're okay there. Doom, doom, tab, conflagrate, tab, conflagrate, tab, and then you do your Prophecy of Doom. And repeat the rotation for 10 times here. And tab, conflagrate, tab, Forge Masters, tab, daunting, tab, conflagrate, Prophecy of Doom, and just repeat until you get the next article. Okay? As you saw, the reason why we do 2 conflagrates is because when we do our Prophecy of Doom, when we're at full div with 1-1 on the Burning and Radiant Shift counter, our 6 encounters take us down to essentially 0 div. So that's why you need to do 2 conflagrates. And then also, when I talk about the conflagrate animation cancel, when you hit conflagrate, when you're just about to have your arm come up and you see the pips come up on your judgment scale, that's when you want to hit the tab button. So tab, and tab, and tab. Otherwise, if you don't tab, it takes you a long time to do anything else. But you can tab and go to your next encounter. Otherwise, you tab, boom. Alright? So that's what I mean with conflagrate animation cancel. Conflagrate, tab, conflagrate, tab, conflagrate, tab. If you tab too early, though, you're going to do the animation and not get the divinity. So I'll show you that here quick. So tab, oh, tab, oh, that was a perfect one. Oh, did too early there. Oh, too early there. Oh, too early there. You're not getting all the conflagrates. Now you are. So just make sure you're not doing the tab too soon. You gotta make sure your arm comes up, you see the yellow pips before you go ahead and do it. Especially if it's laggy. Alright, now finally, let's do the 15% gloves. So we'll look at the rotation here for 15%. Almost identical to the 20% gloves. However, when we do our Prophecy of Doom, and we're at 1-1 here, 1 stack of Burning, 1 stack of Radiant Shift, we're going to be able to do 5 encounters instead of 6 to proc Perfect Balance. So we get to the 5, we get to our Forge Masters, we're not going to have enough Divinity to use our Daunting Light to proc our Perfect Balance. So we have to hit tab again to do Daunting Light, and then wait for Perfect Balance to proc to continue our encounters, okay? And one thing to remember, when you're waiting for Perfect Balance to proc, just use your Lance of Faith to build up Burning Judgment, which will increase your Forge Master's Flame, okay? Yeah, nothing else to do while you wait. You might as well hold down your at will button. Alright, so go ahead and get back to 2-2. Do the artifact call, and then we'll show the sustained rotation for the 15% gloves. So, go ahead and do the call here. 2, 3, belt mount, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tab 6, and tab, conflagrate, Forge Masters, daunting, 1, 2, tab, conflagrate, tab, conflagrate, Prophecy of Doom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of div, tab, daunting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tab out of div, tab, conflagrate, we got a verdict, nice, 1, 2, tab, conflagrate, missed it there, too fast, tab, conflagrate, Prophecy of Doom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tab, daunting, 1, 2, 3, 4, tab, conflagrate, got another verdict, which is great timing. Tab, another verdict, look at that, That's how you get lucky. Get those sudden verdicts right when you need to use your pips there. So let's keep going here. Tab, okay. 1, 2, tab, conflagrate, tab, conflagrate. Rusty Doom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tab, dancing like a faith. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tab, dancing. So you're going to repeat those to infinity. That's the entire Arbiter rotation. It doesn't ever change. Once you perfect it, you're gonna do really well in dungeons and trials. You're gonna impress your friends, impress your girlfriend, impress your boyfriend, whoever. It's gonna be awesome. So those are the rotations using the 3 gloves that are readily accessible. Well, besides the 25%, I guess. So yeah, that is the guide. This is the video, all one cut. Hardly any mistakes. Awesome. Probably too long, just like the guide. Summary conclusions, you can go ahead and read those for yourself. But the big ones I want to point out again, each offensive stat has its own hard cap. Try not to go over the hard cap too much or you're wasting ratings. We'll just go through all these. Screw it. It's not that many. Race doesn't matter. Pick the one you want. Who cares, right? For ability scores, make sure you pick up dexterity, intelligence to start. And then once you're at endgame and you have all your nice gear, you can go ahead and switch 2 of them to strength if you're overcapping critical severity at all. You're going to want to use gear that gives percent stats or percent damage instead of raw stats because, again, there's a hard cap on your raw stats. And once you go over that hard cap, you are no longer empowering yourself with those stats. So better just to use percent if you can to get to those hard caps for the total percentage. Try to get at least 2 offensive artifacts to help out with the team support if you're starting new. And again, I showed you up there, Beacon of Meteor Swarm, Marco's Mystic Marker, Demogorgon's Reach, Night Flame Sensor, Crystal of Soul's Flight. One of those would be great. 2 of those would be awesome. And then, again, please try your best to get the plus 25% base Divinity Gloves. They're going to be so much better for you. Your rotations are going to feel so much smoother. You have to use less inputs to do your damage. It's going to be awesome. Well, good luck getting them. And then class features, we went through it. Doomsayer versus Divine Equilibrium. At the end of the day, the damage difference is not significant. Use whichever one feels better for you. I always use Divine Equilibrium, but again, you do you. Whatever you feel works best for you. Angel of Death, just terrible. They need to rework that. Never use that over Perfect Balance. Do not consume any Judgment pips if you don't have to. Again, we should only be consuming pips if the rotation calls for it, if it has that blue tab for Divinity. If it's not there, don't consume it because every pip you consume, that is 100 magnitude damage that you're missing when you consume those. Keep an internal count on your Burning Radiant Shift. I was counting there while I was doing the rotations. I don't count out loud when I'm actually doing them though. Don't worry. And then get as many boons as you can. Use Genie's gifts if you have the AD. Otherwise, just go ahead and grind out those campaigns as fast as you can because the boons will affect your damage output pretty significantly the more you get. And then summon companions, get as many useful ones as you can. I listed the 5 to 10 up there. The big ones are typically Tutor and Flapjack. Those are the 2 easy ones you can get that every group is going to need. So if you get those 2, you're already in a great spot. When upgrading your companions or your mounts, once you go ahead and you upgrade your companions first and then work on your mounts second. However, I do recommend upgrading at least one of your mounts to Celestial if that's the mount you're going to use for damage, like the Infernal Pounce mount or maybe a magical mount like Tunnel Vision, which is a cheap one, lots of them on the auction house. Golden Touch for the Golden Warhorse, which is only available through the appointment vendor, which is going on right now. This is July 30th, by the way. Or you can get the Giant Toad, which is always a great pick. But yeah, work on your companions first. They're going to give you the most damage output versus upgrading all your mounts first. Your companion bolster is going to cap at 120. Your mount bolster caps at 125. And these bolsters are dictated by your quality of the mount or companion. So I'll give you a little example here. So each of these celestial companions are going to, what does it say here? Let's go on to all of them here. Oh, it says right there, yep. Okay, so the green ones, they're going to give you just 1% of your companion bolster, it says there on the left side there, all the way up to 12% added bolster for celestial companions, okay? And you can't just have 120 green companions to get up to 120% companion bolster. It only takes your 10 best quality companions. So if you have 10 green companions and 10 blue companions, your companion bolster is going to be at 20% because it, again, takes your 10 best quality companions and their bolster. So if it's 2% bolster for each blue and you have 10 of them, that's going to be 20%, right? So again, these give 12%. You have 10 companions, it's going to give you 120% of your bolster. Similar with mounts. If we go ahead and look at the mounts here, so the blue mounts are going to give, it doesn't say there, but if we put a blue mount on here, that's going to give you 2% of your mount bolster. So similar to your companions. And then the celestial ones, though, instead of 12%, they're going to give you 12.5%. So just be aware of that. So again, 10 best mounts, 10 best companions, that's what contributes to your bolster. 120 for your companions and 125 for your mounts. And getting your bolster up is going to increase the amount that your companions, or sorry, for your companions can increase your item level. And then for your mounts, it's actually going to increase the effectiveness of your mount combat power and your mount equip power. Okay? Or, I'm sorry, it's not. Back that up. Rewind it. There's a mistake. Raw cut. Your mounts are always also the companion bolt. The mount bolster is going to increase your item level. The quality of your mounts is going to directly increase the effectiveness of your mount combat power and equip power. The bolster is going to also increase these powers, but not as much. That's why I recommend getting a celestial, let's say Infernal Pounce first, and then working on your companions, because it'll give you the most damage increase there. Okay? Oh, and then, yep, higher percentage bolster, blah, blah. You use Infernal Pounce in all content. Like I said, it's gonna be the best in all content, except the 1% where you have that no physical damage increasers in your team, or you don't have, or if you have the wizard using the Ray and Tab and the Swath and the Smolder. But just use Infernal Pounce because wizards these days don't know how to do that anyway. In terms of upgrade paths, upgrade your mount college last. They're going to give you the least amount of impact for your damage. And then last but not least, please just practice. I've spent countless hours in this stupid freaking training room just practicing those rotations I just showed you. Once you get those rotations perfected, like I said, you are going to do so much more damage. You are going to impress all your friends. I tell you what, take a screenshot of your damage, man. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, that's it. I appreciate you guys hanging out for however long this video is. Probably like an hour and a half by now. Way too long. I hope one of you at least finds this video helpful or finds the guide helpful. That'll make it all worth it for me. If you have any questions, concerns, please leave them in the comments below this video. The comprehensive guide will be in the description. If you find any errors or mistakes, please let me know. Call me out in the comments. I deserve it. Anyway, that's all I got. I appreciate you guys coming by, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good one. Bye.